It's about speed, strength, size, and skill.
Game over!
In the battle to save the world.
If my $20 billion are not delivered, the hostages will die.
These heroes
We're coming!
will go all the way.
We'll have to do better than that.
Okay.
Jean-Claude Van Damme, Raul Julia.
No!
Street Fighter, rated PG-13, starts Friday at theaters everywhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast as part of the From the Cube Podcasting Network. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Blue Sky at Jerome C1985. You can leave a 4 or 5 star review on Apple or Spotify to get those algorithms going. If you are listening and watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, as we are continuing our discussion of important anniversaries here in the year 2024. And I can't believe Brian talked me into this one, and we kind of made a trade. I'm kind of regretting that decision right now because we are going to be talking about 1994's Street Fighter, the live-action version. Brian, going into this, I had not seen this movie in quite some time, maybe even since the first time I watched it way back in the 90s. So this is not a movie that I have nostalgia for. Like Mortal Kombat, I have nostalgia for it. I know it's not a great movie, but I can sit down and I can watch that. This Brian, this is painful. This is taking me back to the days when we were really scratching the drudges of the worst of the superhero movies. We're talking The Punisher, the 1990 Captain America. We are in that territory, Brian, quite honestly. And this was something else, and we're going to get into it and talk about all the reasons that this movie is kind of a disaster in so many ways. But Brian, this is a movie that very much is in your wheelhouse. It's something that you feel personally connected to. So I'm going to let you get into that connection right now.
So basically, this came out Christmas weekend, I believe it was, and then around that time, and then on December 26th, I remember specifically going with my cousin to the theater, but we were late to the theater, so we came in right when Guile destroys that underground fighting ring before Vega and Ryu can hook it up. And I remember walking into that exact moment knowing I missed so much, which is why I went the second time a couple weeks later. Now, if you got to put things in perspective here, let's kind of put things in perspective when it comes to 1994 movies in December. Tony Khan recently put this tweet out. I found it because it's this list of movies that he went to in December of 94. I'm going to go over this list right now. First, The Santa Claus, Dumb and Dumber, Star Trek Generations, Street Fighter, Mixed Nuts, Richie Rich, IQ, and Trapped in Paradise, all in the same month that this guy went to. And I kept thinking, like, I have vague memories of seeing Santa Claus and Street Fighter in the same month. So that just brought back all these nostalgic memories. But, I can't help but say that I've watched this movie like 30 times. And for some reason, I don't know what it is. It's just maybe the quotability of it all, or just the fact that it's like one of the few and only times we see all the Street Fighter characters live in color together interacting. Which is still kind of rare considering some of these remakes and sequels that have come out in the last 15 years don't even have all the Street Fighter characters because they wanted to be cheap on it and didn't license all the characters for the movie. In this case, when this came out, they demanded that all the Street Fighter characters were in this movie. And what was the big problem with Street Fighter 2, Jerome? There were no updates back in the day, so you had to buy the new copy each and every 6 months that they updated the game. And you had the Champion Edition, the Turbo Hyper Fighting Edition, the new Challengers Edition, and the regular Turbo Edition. And I remember playing the Turbo Edition on Sega. I think the regular edition my cousin had, and then it was just kind of like a mixed bag of whoever had it. Your friends had whatever version, and you had to go from there. I wasn't a big fan of the Hyper Fighting one because it was too fast. And, like, let me tell you, I'm not the best at Street Fighter at all. I just love the character design, the color work. I sucked at, Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, but I loved playing with my friends back in the day because it was just so fun. And I guess that's where the nostalgia kind of kicks in. And maybe it's just the fact that there's so many quotes that I remember from this movie, and I'm not the only one who does. It's like the people that have like a sick kind of love for this movie like I do remember all these quotes. And somehow it's just, I don't know. And I've seen other reviews on YouTube where it's just like the same people have the same ideas as I do. It's like the same quotes. They love Van Damme, even though he's so terrible on this. And there's so much to talk about in terms of the background of this movie. It's like ridiculous. and I guess this is I guess I don't know if you know this, Jerome, but some of the characters, when translated from Japan originally, were mixed up. So basically, Balrog was originally Bison, and when they were going to import it to America, they were going to call him Mike Tyson and license Mike Tyson for the game. But his sexual charge just came up, and that was a big no-no, and Capcom said, So when they ported it to the U.S., they mixed the characters up, and Bison became the Bison we know, when originally he was Vega, and Vega was Balrog. So, yeah, just a little quick note there. That always blows my mind, and I look it up, and it's kind of true that that's also kind of why Nintendo stepped away from Mike Tyson with Punch-Out when they did Punch-Out 2 for Super Nintendo. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that kind of ties in with Mike Tyson in this franchise, considering that Bruce Lee kind of influences the Mortal Kombat franchise and Van Damme as well to an extent. And, of course, Van Damme was supposed to be Johnny Cage, but, shit happens. And now he's Guile, and I kind of wish that maybe you switched the parts maybe, because I think we would have had a better Guile out of the guy that played Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat. But that's just me. I don't know.
You look at the director of this movie, Stephen D. Souza, and he's got some chops. I'm not saying that Commando is a great movie, but clearly there is a solid action pedigree behind it. And he also had a hand in Running Man as well as Die Hard. So this isn't like a hack, but I just look at this movie and I'm like, what in the hell happened? Was this just a complete mismatch? Why does this movie just not work? Because fundamentally, I from the very beginning, this feels like it feels like a hack directed it. And when I was rewatching it, there's so many things that are fascinating about this movie. But I want to start with Jean-Claude Van Damme, because Jean-Claude Van Damme kind of came in on the heels of the Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Sylvester Stallone. You get kind of your A quality guys like those two, and then you kind of there's kind of a runoff there with your Chuck Norrises, your Steven Seagals, your Jean-Claude Van Dammes, and clearly those three guys are not in the same league as Stallone and Arnold, but they kind of carved their own niches out for themselves. Chuck Norris did kind of low rent action, and then he did his own TV series. Steven Seagal kind of did a lot of B movies in his own right. And Jean-Claude Van Damme, this is very clearly an attempt by Jean-Claude Van Damme to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. You can tell in his delivery, you can see it in the dialogue that is written for him. He is designed to be the Arnold Schwarzenegger of this movie. And he just doesn't have the chops. And the funny thing is, you can tell he's a great fighter. You can tell that he is somebody that if you gave him the right script, if you gave him the right energy and directed it in the right place, I think Jean-Claude Van Damme can be in a good movie, because we've talked about it before, but the irony to me is that the best tournament movie he ever did was Bloodsport, and the movie that should have been a tournament movie, he is just awful in.
See, there's the debate is should this be a tournament? Should this be based on the character? Bison wanted to take over the world because that's kind of the background of the fighting stages anyway. So it's very weird. I don't know what direction you would take it, because I guess the animated cartoon in the 90s kind of took it into a little bit of both, where it's like Ryu and Ken were kind of fighters trying to find their honor or something, and they had issues with Bison, but they're fighting people along the way, right? It's not necessarily a tournament. It's more like their gauntlet, while Guile's trying to do his revenge plot against, Bison. Same thing with Chun-Li. So it's hard to approach this, because it's I think they had the right idea. They just didn't execute the Street Fighter element too much. Because the street fights we got, it's some of them were just half-assed. One was just a fake sumo fight that was supposed to be a Godzilla knockoff fight that just ends poorly. And the fight that we really built up to in the first act with Vega and Ryu, the one that I walked in on, they didn't even fight until the end, and the fight was not even that great. And the fight would have been great if you put it in that great barbed wire cage that they had put together for that set before they destroyed it. But God.
So I want to interrupt you for a second. It felt to me early on they were going for if not parody, but either an homage to some of the Hong Kong movies that we watched from the 80s and 90s. It felt like they were going in that direction, but then they completely went away from it as the movie progressed.
I feel that too. It felt like Van Damme's ego, not ego, but like his persona kind of dictated some of the action and the way the movie would go.
I mean, I don't even know if I agree with that, because I feel like if he had more say in it, I almost feel like the movie, I don't know that the movie would be significantly better, but I feel like the movie would at least have more personality to it.
You would think with all the cocaine use, because apparently Van Damme was spending like so many G's on coke each week.
Yes, there's a book about action heroes, and there's definitely parts about that. Highly recommend that book.
Crazy amount of money, but you can tell like he's sweating and like he's like aggressive, and so I get it, because that's kind of what the Guile character
and he is giving a terrible performance.
But the problem is Guile's like an American, right? And he's got this American tattoo. So I don't know. It's kind of like when an actor comes in, he's like, "I'm not doing the local accent. You can forget it. I'm just doing my own accent," and that's what happened here.
It feels like they cast it. It feels like they looked at a poster of the animated Guile, and they're like, "Who is the closest person that looks like Guile?" And they just picked Jean-Claude Van Damme. Did you notice his hair was very red in the first scene and then wasn't red the rest of the movie? Because I definitely noticed that.
Yes, that's the big issue with the movie that people point out. It's because they didn't even go
tons of continuity errors, right?
And I guess they're trying to. I guess the theory is that they tried to blonde his hair for the movie, and then when they started filming, it turned red, and they just gave up. Like, that's the working theory. That's the only thing that can make sense.
God.
Because why else would you do it? Yeah, because then it'd be blonde in the middle of the movie and then red at the beginning. It's like, well, at this point, let's just give up. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where it's like, I've heard stories about like they were like behind a production and they would just rip out pages out of the script. Like, we're not behind anymore. You know what I mean? It's like one of those plague productions as to why like some of these action sequences get set up and then just get disassembled like really quick. And then we end up with like this, like not Empire Strikes Back, a New Hope type ending going on, like blowing up the Death Star. It's like, oh shit, how do we get out of this? I guess we blow it up like the Death Star, and that's kind of what happened. And the actual Street Fighter stuff was like okay when it came to Guile and Bison, but the problem is like Bison got kicked and then he just flew like I don't know how many feet. So does that mean Guile's got like superpowers? And they don't acknowledge the superpowers part. So it's like, what's on the table, what's not on the table? Like, because Bison is like got electricity powers, but Ken doesn't have his Hadoken. So it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Because I think the fans would have been more receptive to, I think, the Mortal Kombat 2021 thing where it's like they have powers, but they got to earn them kind of thing. Or there's the origin story gimmick like with Blanca.
Oh my God, don't even get me started on that. Just genuinely another terrible idea.
I know. Like, and he didn't even
fight.
He didn't even fight.
This is the problem when you base a movie on a video game and you fundamentally miss what the actual game is about. I mean, that's why I think something like The Last of Us is so successful, is because, and to be fair, The Last of Us is much more of a narrative game than Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. So I feel like you have kind of an easier path, but I look at something like that. I look at Fallout. I look at those as kind of more successful video game adaptations, and even something like Arcane, which is not a pure adaptation of League of Legends, but in many ways is kind of better than that game, I think, is in terms of the presentation. But this not only doesn't respect the material, but is just poorly made. I mean, that to me is the biggest issue with these video game movies. Whenever they talk trash about them, the issue isn't necessarily about honoring the game, but it's much more about the quality. I mean, I look at Sonic, which admittedly, I don't think those three movies are great, but I think those movies are decent enough in that I think they're pretty entertaining. I think they're fun to watch, but I don't think in any way they're honoring the spirit of the Sonic games, because the Sonic games should be purely animated, and they're not. The movies are not animated.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's just kind of complicated because at the time it's just like there was no Mortal Kombat yet to base it off of. That was a year later. It's like Mortal Kombat based some of their stuff on this, so they had like Bloodsport to rely on. So it's not a lot to rely on, is what I'm saying. So they were kind of like doing that, like you said, that kung fu action movie style.
I mean, they're trying to strip the name for parts, but they don't understand what made Street Fighter successful.
For sure. And then like casting Ming-Na Wen was a good choice. It's just they kind of, I don't know. They built her character up as if she was the one to actually kill Bison, and I feel like, I don't know, there's always that decision in my head, like who kills Bison? Guile or Chung Li? And in my head I'm thinking maybe they could just kill them both at the same time and that would have been more satisfactory, but it ended up being like he has to come to her aid, like she's a damsel in distress, and she plays on that in that great monologue she has, or not monologue dialogue with Bison. But man, it just feels like she should have saved herself, and it didn't happen. It ended up being like Guile said, it's his vendetta. So, but I don't know
The
why.
thing is that at this stage, Ming-Na is kind of a younger actress. I mean, she's 31 at this point, and like the problem when you have somebody who is either not a good director or somebody who isn't good with actors, like I think her performance ends up being all over the place. And it's funny because like her breakout was the Joy Luck Club, and then she follows it up by doing this, and it's a kind of a weird transition. And like you could totally see, oh, she does really well in this small like independent movie, and then you cast her in this big movie, but she's kind of left to flail. She doesn't really get a lot to do. Like she gets a couple of action scenes, but like her character just doesn't. It feels like she should be the main character at a certain point. But I would guess that the director and the kind of the people behind this have some right wing mentality because of the way they speak about journalists, and Guile specifically does not like journalists. So her character is just put in a terrible position.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I did love that little bit of dialogue she had with Raul Julia. It's like they were playing off each other, and at least that was cool because it's Raul Julia, and he's giving space to his other actor on the screen to like give their, like he was giving good reactions to her speech. So I thought that was like, Raul Julia again lifting and elevating a piece of work that doesn't necessarily need to lift it, kind of like his Frankenstein role when he shouldn't have been in that movie anyway. But he did it, I guess, as a favor. But in this case, like he did it for his kids, and that's always what we hear about some of these actors taking these roles. It's like we did it because our kids wanted us to do it, and we wanted to do it for our kids. So at least that was kind of like one of his final gifts to his kids, so to speak, because Raul Julia passed away 2 months before this movie even came out. It's unfortunate, man, and we've talked about him before, and we love Raul Julia here on this podcast, and we probably got to watch more of his stuff from the 70s and 80s. But I mean, ideally, it's like he is known as Bison and Gomez Adams. So, it's incredible that he was just putting so much effort in this. And I watched this on Blu-ray, by the way, and I'll talk about the Blu-ray in a second because that quality was shit. But you can kind of tell now, like in some scenes where it's like, oh, this guy's like kind of sick. Like you can tell something's kind of off with his face or something, and the way he's like not necessarily moving around. It's almost as if like things are moving around him just to make them like he's moving kind of thing. But he's clearly not moving as much. And if you look at the fight sequence, it's clear like they did a lot of shots on the wide angle because they didn't want to show close as a Raul Julia a stunt double, because it was mainly just a stunt double at that point. But yeah, it's unfortunate, man. But at least we get, I mean, some of his most memorable lines people remember from this movie. Like I mentioned this line about to Jerome, like, for you, it was one of the greatest days of your life, or one of the most important days of your life that Bison came to your town. For me, it was just a Tuesday. And I've kind of used that line in like different ways. And I guess I got it from that just subconsciously. But yeah, he's got a lot of memorable lines, and so does Guile. So I think that's why some of that nostalgic charm sticks with me, even though half the movie's crap. And I would say the other half is like decently entertaining enough that I find it entertaining. Like as bad as the final shot of the movie is, where they all pose and those stupid poses just for the Streetfighter logo final shot.
Just the absolute worst.
But the colors are cool because they at least got the bright colors. You know what I'm saying?
One of the most unearned versions of that shot ever. Like if that scene in 2012's Avengers, if that's like peak, this is like the complete other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, for sure. I also wanted to mention after this viewing, I'm convinced I don't have 100% certainty, but Zangief has got to be a variation of Nikita Koloff, man, because it's the babyface turn. It's the realization that he was on the wrong side.
You cast a wrestler in this role like some WWE wrestler would. I mean, Streetfighter, I don't think has any sort of panache. So I am going to speculate that there's no way we will ever see a furtherance of this franchise at this stage. But I mean, look, Raul Julia is very much innocent. Like that is 100% the case. Like I will not hear any negative things stated about him, and it's not just because of his unfortunate cancer that he was dealing with, but he's just absolutely incredible in this movie. Like he is singularly the reason that this movie is watchable. Not just the dialogue, but his performance is perfectly calibrated to the movie that he's in. He is the only person that seems to have understood what this movie was and is at least embracing some of the elements of it. Even if this movie is bad, Raul Julia is really good. And again, I think he is able to excel in a movie that is just a complete disaster otherwise. Like, I would give this movie like a 3 out of 10, and Raul Julia is like 2.5 of those points because he is just every piece of dialogue. He's just killing it. And the dialogue isn't even necessarily good. He's just great at delivering it. And I think that is a testament to him as a performer. I mean, there was the old joke about Kelsey Grammer on Cheers that the writers used to write the absolute dirt worst dialogue for him because they wanted to see if he could kill it, and he did every time. And it kind of feels the same principles going on here. Like this movie is bad, but Raul Julia is just wonderful in this role, and it's really unfortunate that this was his last role because he deserved a better movie. Like his performance is amazing, but he deserved a much better movie to go on. And there's like this whole untapped career that we need to get into at some point because we've talked about him presumed innocent, talked about him here. Where I don't know that we're ever gonna dive into the Addams Family, but maybe we should just to continue discussing the greatness that is Raul Julia. But yeah, he is a clear highlight of this movie. Brian, are there any other actors or performances that we need to highlight?
I guess we got to point out Wes Studi.
Oh my God.
Another Wes Studi film in our lineup that we've reviewed. But the thing is like I found it funny that he's playing in Indian from India, right? Because
all brown people are the same.
Well, because I think Sagat, the character, is supposed to be from there. But the funny thing is they casted a Native American Indian. So it's like Christopher Columbus all over again, mixing up the Indians. So I don't know if that's just a comment on society as us fucking up with this casting, or is just like a weird like casting because it was like, oh, brown people, sure. But apparently he I guess he tried out for the role. So I guess there it is, but he's. I mean,
I'm in no way criticizing him because you have to imagine that somebody in his position is not exactly getting a lot of opportunities. So you got to take any opportunity that comes your way. So I am in no way criticizing him, but it just sucks that somebody like him, like until really Reservation Dogs, like he doesn't really get a chance to showcase what he can do. But this is another reminder that everybody needs to go ahead and watch that TV show, Reservation Dogs.
Yeah, and again, if you want to see him in a fun movie, check out what was that movie that the monster movie we saw with him in it when he was playing a mercenary? I forgot the name, but you can look it up. He's in that movie, and it's fun.
He's been in a ton of stuff. I mean, he's in Heat. I mean, he's been in a ton of things. He was in Mystery Men, which we've talked about. So, I mean, we've certainly talked about his prolific career. I mean, he's wonderful, but this movie is just not. It does not play to his strengths at all. I mean, yeah, this is just it's very choppy. I mean, I don't really feel like we need to say much about Kylie Minogue. I don't think she really does a whole lot in this movie. Damien Chapa, same thing. Not sure we need to really talk about him all that much.
He was on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say he was on something, but the dude looked like he hadn't slept since he filmed Blood In, Blood Out, which was like 2 years before this or something. So
I mean, you look at his IMDb and his performances, and it's kind of a graveyard of just one-offs and not much going on in his career, unfortunately. But yeah, that's kind of the story of this movie. There's a lot of.
I gotta mention one more actor just because I feel like he needs to be credited for his B movie career. But anytime you cast Miguel Nunez Jr. in a movie. And if you look up his IMDb, he's all over the place. Friday the 13th, Part 5. I think Joanna Man or something like that. Just crazy stuff.
Yes.
But the reason you hire this guy, facial reactions and one-liner deliveries, and he just delivered on both. So I'm cool with that. He delivered.
You want to talk about a wild IMDb? It's unbelievable. I mean, we're talking about something like Juana Man. You're just talking about just again another graveyard of crap, and then you've got some clear highlights. Like he's in some movies that are
Return of the Living Dead, which I know you haven't seen, but that he's got a fun role in that too. It's part of that '80s group of gang.
He's all over the place. I mean, he's done a ton of TV as well. I mean, he's one of these working actors, and that's kind of how it goes. You end
Credit to him, because he definitely sold some of those lines, and the way he looked at Zangief when Zangief delivered the most infamous line of the movie.
I do appreciate. Like he's clearly
trying. The channel. Yeah.
But man, this movie is not good, Brian. I'm sorry, but this is painful.
I'm cool with that. I give it a 5 out of 10. Every once in a while, it's good to watch. I just got to say this: when I watched the Blu-ray copy that I had for the first time, finally, I was really disappointed. And this is from like 2012 it was released, and they didn't clean up the picture at all. It looked like a digital copy of a DVD rip, and I was just so like.
That's kind of amazing, because this is a movie that definitely found success through home video. So it's surprising to me that little
kid didn't notice the quality on VHS, because VHS is like that low grade anyway. But once they started upgrading, you can tell like, oh, there's a lot of dirty picture quality here that they just didn't bother to clean up. Considering I've watched Jaws on Blu-ray, and the Jaws copy is much more cleaner than this, and they're both Universal. And the Universal logo looks so dirty at the beginning. I was just so like, what is going on here? Because because I rented this on Amazon, and it was also pretty awful. So I don't know. I think Arrow needs to do something, because it's clearly this is an Arrow type movie to fix up and polish and release for $40 on a nice, steelbook or whatever. Nice art.
No, they're never gonna get that kind of release though.
We'll see, because this movie grossed 100 million worldwide on a budget of 35. So it's like, yes, it was a success, I guess.
It's probably possible. I mean, again, home video and TV, I guess, push this into profit.
Yeah, that would also, extra money on the top of that. So yeah, I would say the cult following is there for sure. Like, I'm part of it, but it's not like we're saying that this is one of the greatest movies ever. It's like one of those midnight movies.
It is certainly not a great movie at all.
No, but it's definitely a midnight movie. You get, a little stoned, a little drunk too. If you happen to be in one of those like near an art house type theater that plays old movies, this is definitely the type of movie to go.
I mean, to me, the thing that's weird is this is so we are in the month of December 2024. This is the 30th anniversary of Streetfighter, and I really haven't seen a lot said about the fact that it is the 30th anniversary. And I don't know. Is this a byproduct of?
I don't know. I feel like more people are talking about Time Cop now. I don't know why, but
thing. I mean, that is purely.
Well, coincidentally, I watched it for the first time this year too, because I knew it was the '94 thing, and we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. But it was on my '94 list too because of the anniversary. So I don't know, but it does feel Time Cop's getting more love now than Street Fighter, which is fine. I'm cool with that.
It's Tony Khan, absolutely. Him liking that movie is why you're probably much more. You're hearing about it more, and that's fine. Like, I'm not judging. It's just, I think that is a byproduct. And Street Fighter does not have any.
Well, we can talk about that maybe at a different time, because Time Cop, I think, does have a legit good sci-fi script. It just has a little bit of that Van Damme twinge to it, which is fine. It's just, I think the script goes underappreciated based on like, oh, we're gonna have to give the audience a happy ending, but I think a happy ending for this certain character is like what we needed in that movie. So that's just my opinion on that.
Absolutely. All right. So our suffering is going to continue this week. Please check our YouTube channel. We are going to be reviewing A Very Brady Christmas. You're gonna love the reaction that Brian has to this movie. And speaking of suffering, Brian, next week, originally we were going to do a movie for New Year's Eve, but we have decided to punt our 1994 discussion. We are going to be doing a top 10 of 1994. That is going to be the last show of this year. Because there's some movies that I wanted to get in before I completed my top 10 of 94. And I know Brian feels the same. So we are punting 1994 discussion for a couple weeks. But Brian, I asked for something just kind of quick and dirty. And you have done me quick and dirty. What are we talking about next week?
Well, I guess I was one of the few people as a youngster that thought Ghostbusters 2 was cool. And I guess there's more hate for that movie than I thought, because I have met a handful of people that just do not like Ghostbusters 2, and I'm disappointed every time because
Do
I don't know.
not. So
I don't know
it'll
what
be-
it is. Maybe it's the Bobby Brown connection. I don't know, but we were reviewing Ghostbusters 2. We're going to check it out again. It's also a New Year's movie, so that's going to be fun. And, I guess we'll have our Ghostbuster discussion based on what we saw this year and Frozen Empire and our thoughts on Afterlife, I guess, really quick, just to kind of.
Or do I have some
button on it.
takes on the Ghostbusters franchise?
Yeah, we'll talk mostly Ghostbusters 2, but, and I'm going to try to defend the movie.
We're definitely going to have it out, I think, because there is a lot to say about this franchise that just will not go away. Like, it is just around, and I
it's
don't.
still making money. I don't know how, but it's still making the money. So every time it comes out, it grosses $100 million, and it just seems like this franchise is always going to be that consistent. So I don't know, but I will say this: like, looking back now, it's definitely the weaker of the two, and it's probably because I saw Ghostbusters 2 first. But we'll talk about it next week. But I'm going to defend this, and I was going to put it on the underrated list that we did a while back, but kind of got outvoted out because I wanted to prioritize some other stuff. But this will be, I guess, a comeback.
Because in 2 weeks we're doing something that I really want to do, Eyes Wide Shut. So I'm letting Brian have his moments.
Well, I guess this would be a special edition of underrated sequels. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. So we're bringing that back.
I don't know that I'm going to agree to that, but if you want to go there, go ahead.
I mean, it's going to end up that way anyway. So one night only. I'm going to try to defend Ghostbusters 2 till I die. So there you go.
All right. So for Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.